Hey everyone, Jay here. Just a quick mention that I have a new group start of my teacher training scheduled for next week. If you've been looking for a vehicle to jumpstart a deeper inquiry into personal practice, or reinvigorate your teaching, or simply touch base with your passion for yoga, and you have a feeling that I might be someone you could do that with, then now might be the right moment to sign up. The program is designed to be co-creative and fits to you, so you don't have to jump through a series of linear hoops, but instead leaves room to explore the transformational spaces that exist between us. Some of my most rewarding yogic exchange is happening in the training, and I'd be happy for you to join me there. You can find out more and register at jbrownyoga.com. All right, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown, and I'm back. I'm home, coming to you once again from my usual perch in my attic in Easton, Pennsylvania. If you've been around for the last few weeks, you probably know I just got back from a trip to the UK and Ireland. Last week's episode posted right when I was in the midst of trying to get home, and boy, was that a challenge. I gotta say the workshops in Manchester and Dublin were fantastic. They were, for me, so important. Just on a basic level, I really needed to affirm for myself that the connections that are happening between me and other people in my online classes and my online training, and just through people listening to this show, that those connections are real, that they're not just projections. It made me think, some of you who are maybe in similar age to me and maybe were single at an earlier, more innocent time on the internet, like I remember maybe like 25 years ago, maybe more, oh my God. But before I met my wife, when I was single and the internet was a new thing, I did like a little bit of online dating, and you would have these like text, email kind of exchanges with someone online and feel like you made a real connection to them. But then when you actually went out to dinner and you were in the same room, like the vibe wasn't there, you know, it wasn't real. It was something that you had created in your mind. And I've felt pretty confident that the yoga I was having with people and the connections people were making with me just through listening to this show, that those are real. And being in the same room and looking at someone in the eyes who has been listening to this show regularly, who has my voice in their ear every Monday for years now, to be in the same room with that person, look them in the eye and have them tell me something about that, share something about that with me, was just so invaluable. It makes all the effort that I make to do this show worthwhile. And it makes me feel better about the fact that what I've been doing online is, I don't know, it's been of some value, you know, to somebody out there. So everybody who was at the workshops, you know who you are. Thank you so much. It was really so enriching, and I'm just very, very grateful to everyone. And even on a financial level, while it wasn't like fantastic, it was still good enough, you know, it was good enough to make me feel like, yes, it's worth it to do it, you know? And it is so incredible the way that life can be so ironic sometimes, because I was definitely on a high from the 2 weekends of workshops. Just, it was so enriching, and I just was really feeling inspired and like ready to come home. We came to all kinds of interesting ideas to go forward with, which we're going to talk about some today in today's conversation with my friends Jason Shaw and Emily Brown, which I'll say a bit about in just a few moments. And so I was coming home with all of these ideas, feeling inspired, and then life decided to test that in me, decided to say, oh, really? You're feeling that hopeful? Let's see. So first thing that happened was my last leg home. I had one more flight to make to get home. It was a 7-hour red-eye flight scheduled to leave from Heathrow to Newark Airport at 8 p.m. at night. And all of my other flights and all of my trains and cars and all the other stuff I had to plan for the trip, everything went smooth. There was no real issues. I was feeling like, wow, man, the winds are blowing in my direction, And then I was on this high, I'm coming home, and then bam, the last flight gets delayed 5.5 hours. So I'm just stranded at the airport, which wouldn't have been so bad if simultaneously while I was stranded at the Heathrow airport, my wife was driving to go pick up my daughter from an after-school activity, and our one family car died. And, I've had the car for 10 years. It's got 150,000 miles on it. I knew that the engine was wore down because there was a period of time when it wasn't well taken care of. And, I was hoping I had more time and that it wouldn't just die in the way that it did, where all of a sudden the engine starts making a noise and it's not drivable anymore. So I land and I come home into what is a crisis situation for the family because we need a car to do the things that we do in the family. And so it was I had no time to adjust, The next day I was taking the car to the dealership and finding out that the cost to fix it would well exceed the market value and was equivalent to getting another car, a newer car. And, it's a longer story, which maybe I'll share some on the other side if you want, but I definitely felt like I was shown some grace. But I feel like the grace that I was shown was connected to me meeting the challenge of it, me meeting the test of, oh, you're going to be hopeful and you're going to think that everything's possible. Well, let me just check you on that, sir. Life does that, doesn't it? In any case, there's a little more there, and like I said, I'll share some with you on the other side if you want to stick around. In the end, though, things have leveled out now, and I'm feeling a little bit more back into a groove, I've got some bearings about me. And I have a series of conversations to share with you. Some of them came out of a recent solo episode I did. If you were around some weeks back when I was talking about feeling this impulse to maybe open a center again and what are the economic realities around that? And a lot of people reached out to me, and it's led to a number of conversations with people who I think are finding ways to make it work, or who have found a way to have sustainability in what is usually not a very sustainable endeavor. And I just wanted to learn from them. I wanted to connect with them and see if we can't all glean a little bit of wisdom from their example. And I think it is certainly true for my talk today with Jason Shaw and Emily Brown. I met Jason and Emily many years ago, 2014 at Kripalu. And even back then, they made this impression on me that there was something about how they were doing what they were doing and who they were that I wanted to take inspiration from. And it was very fitting that in this moment, all these years later, 10 years later, they resurfaced into in my sphere and really, we connected on a bunch of stuff that I think's super important right now. So it was great to talk with them again, and it's really a pleasure to be sharing it with you today. Real quick before we get to it, if you want to connect with me in other ways besides listening to the show, there's lots of ways for us to do it. I've got ongoing live classes, practice sessions. I've got discussion groups. I've got a teacher training with a new group starting soon, I think next week. And you can also just sign up for my free email list and stay up to date with all of my stuff. Everything can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all. I think that's good. We'll just leave it there for now. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get into this. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Jason Shaw and Emily Brown. Hello.
Hey, Jay.
Hi, Emily.
It's so good to see you.
And you. Hi, Jason.
Hello, Jay. Nice to see you.
So cool.
We love the new hair. Your hair looks great.
Oh, thanks. That's new. Yes.
It suits you.
I love it.
Thanks. Well, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Like, the thing for me with it is I realized, I guess I turned 50, and at the end of last year, I realized that I've cut my hair like every 4 weeks my entire life. So I don't even know what I look like if I don't do that. I look drastically different. And if I let the beard grow, forget about it. It's like I look like a completely different person. So I've just been kind of marveling at that and observing, wow, if I stop doing things to control what my appearance looks like, what do I actually look like?
Yeah, that's deep.
Yeah.
Anyways, listen, I am already recording. I think you guys listen to the show. You know how I operate. I don't want that to be a surprise to you. Let's consider ourselves having just begun, okay?
Yes.
Of course.
Well, listen, I love that we're meeting, and it's one of those moments for me where I feel like no time has passed. Like we could still be sitting at that table at Kripalu, chatting. What year was it? I couldn't remember. Do you guys remember when that was that we met at Kripalu? I mean, I think it's maybe 2014 or 15. I can't remember. Do either of you remember?
It was either of those, definitely. It was 2014, 2015.
Yeah, I had a program at Kripalu and we met. And the reason it's so significant for me personally to talk to both of you is that when we met, it was pretty much when the center that I had in Brooklyn was really kind of like trucking. It was doing pretty good. Josh and I had just made the DVD. I remember you and me and Josh, Jason having some conversations about the business side of things, if I remember.
Yeah.
But it was only a few years later where it did kind of fall apart. And I made this move to where I am now. And when I was making that move, you both were absolutely in my head.
Oh, wow.
Because you were two people I had met who were a model of a potential other lifestyle than the one that I was leading.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember we were talking about sustainability back then.
Yeah.
And you guys are still standing. I was at the Our Country Hearts and the Binghamton Yoga websites, and I was just like, yes, you guys are still trucking. So cool to see you. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
Thank you for inviting us. It was really wonderful to hear from you because, like you said, it feels like no time has passed. And from that time in Kripalu and then the time when we were going down to see friends in Philadelphia and thought, well, we'll drive by and see it. Like, I was teaching in, I think it was Allentown at the time. And we we were running late and we ran in and it was such a funny
I completely forgot
moment.
about that. You guys came to Allentown while I was there. Oh, yeah.
Yep. And you were really working your slow flow at that point, but in even a new perspective on it. And that's really what drew us to you, and your Kripalu event was that we were headed into the slower flow, and we really agreed with you.
Yeah, I was at a point in my own practice, and I was a newer teacher, and I was dealing with a lot of pain in my hip, and I was having a hard time adjusting to not doing the full version of the posture, and I had a real crisis of identity because I couldn't do some of these poses that I had identified with for a really long time. And I remember, I think I saw it on Facebook. You had your video out, and it was like, gentle is the new advanced. And I thought, that is exactly what I need to look into.
Yeah. And I remember also that it made sense also for like where you were and the demographic of people that you were working with. I know you had like moved into yoga therapy stuff, and you were looking, as I was, for like, I don't know, bridges for these group classes to not have to be the power thing.
Yep.
That was so popular. Like, can we have group yoga classes that aren't power? That's where that slogan came from.
Yep.
Yeah.
You might find it interesting that the first time I tried slow yoga, so like you, I come from Ashtanga, and I became an Ashtanga teacher because my teacher left for India, and she said, well, I'm gone, you're going to teach my class. And I had no real training other than going to Ashtanga, right? But that's fine because it's a pretty much set series. But it's very different when you're walking around the room watching people, and you begin to realize, I'm not sure this looks really good for them. Like, they look like they're kind of hurting, even if they don't know it. So one day I had a small class, and everybody I knew was a good friend, basically, from coming to class. And I said, you know what? I want to try something different. And I basically ran the whole series in reverse. I started in corpse pose, worked through seated, like laying, seated. You had to adjust a little bit. But we ended on the high note of the sun salutations, and it was such a different feeling. And I realized at that point that I wasn't just teaching a series anymore. I was like controlling the energy of the room. And instead of ending at that like low, just really calm point, which isn't bad. I mean, I love that too. But this was like a morning class, and it lifted us to have just a day of, expansion sort of. And I thought, boy, I'm going to have to try some different stuff.
That's so interesting too, even just in terms of like sequencing and, like you said, the way like the energy of the room shifts.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that a lot of what I do has always been geared, and I think that's because I was in Brooklyn. Like, everybody was already so pumped and tweaked and pushing too hard. It was all about like giving ourselves permission to like down regulate and like not have to do so much. That's why I think you and I are getting along, Emily.
Absolutely. Like, everybody just needs to breathe.
Yeah.
And you both, I recall, we're also kind of doing acro yoga stuff, if I recall.
That's right. That's right.
Which I think at some point I like had, I don't know, opinions about, but I also remember like when I was in New York, I was doing contact improv, which was a lot of the same thing, like giving and receiving, push and pull, taking each other's weight, and there was so much value in that. And so I guess now that I'm a little older and I don't have as much judgments on these things, I'm like, oh, well, I get it. I see what acro yoga is about. It's the same stuff I was doing when we were doing that. And that was really valuable in terms of like communication and interrelationship with other bodies. So
Absolutely.
You guys still do acro yoga? Or are you too old for that?
Unfortunately, COVID kind of nipped that in the bud, the closeness and everything. And it was difficult to sustain that. But it's been a practice. I mean, it was a practice that drew Jason and I together as partners. It was a wonderful place for us to work together, to learn how to communicate, to learn how to trust each other, to play as well. Like, it doesn't all have to be serious all of the time. And that, you're not going to maybe succeed at this one trick right away, but you'll come back to it over and over, and maybe you get it, maybe you don't, but it should be fun,
Yeah, I think also the more I can see it as not being able to do the trick, but all the interrelating that's going on in the process of playing with the tricks,
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, right. Okay. If we're not about trying to achieve cool tricks at the Yoga Journal conference, like I just remember going to a Yoga Journal conference and people were doing acro yoga and it felt like we were at the circus. And I was like, what are we doing? You know, we were at like a literal circus. But if I strip away that and I just see Emily and Jason doing acro yoga together in a studio, then I'm like, oh, that's about a whole bunch of stuff. It's not about what I saw at that conference, you know.
And our favorite way to do it actually anymore is like a private with two people who just want to learn to communicate with each other. Because that really is, like you said about contact improv, that's where it's at. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter whether you can do star or you can just, you know, hold each other's weight. It's really about the second, not the first. Mm-hmm. In fact, we found that the performative aspect became our least happy part of it. We really
it became like a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like, you know, some of that can be hard on your body depending on how your body is. So
absolutely, 100%.
Well, I guess I'm also curious, getting back to kind of where we started today and where I mentioned that you had been in my head when I was making this move out of the city. And I was like in need of like inspiring examples of people not living in a big city and still like having thriving lives. It was like, I don't know. I just was really hung up and I thought that I needed to be in the city and then realized I needed to get out of the city. Yeah. And so I guess I'm curious, you guys, you're in Endicott, New York. Is that right?
Our studio is located in Endicott, New York, but we're called Binghamton Yoga.
Maybe I should say like, we're in a county that's about 200,000 and our town has about 50,000. But the little village we're in is more like a 12 to 13,000 of that. And so, you know, you keep getting to smaller numbers, right? And that kind of leads to who becomes the students. It's not a small town, but it's not a big town. We're a small middle market is what I'd probably say. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if it was like advertising, that's probably what they would think of us as. Middle incomes are the people we speak with mostly. And they're generally, I hate to say it because I'm in this group too, but they're a little bit older, right? Like you and I, 50 is a pretty normal age for us. Maybe 40 to 70, Emily, you think?
I'd say so. We definitely have so our studio is on a second floor. I would love if we were on a first floor because then it would mean we could really open it up to like real serious chair yoga and all sorts of things like that. But we, as a result, second floor, we have a capable 70-year-old. You know, they can go up 2 flights of stairs.
I mean, that's an interesting logistical consideration, though. If you got to walk upstairs to get to the studio, there's certain limitations depending, you know?
Yeah.
You wouldn't even think of that in some towns, though. Like, I remember going in San Francisco to Yoga Loft and other places, like, that's just what it is. You never thought about that. But when you're in a small market with a slightly older population, many of our students are retired. Many come to us with knee or hip replacements and other things, as well as other younger people who do our other classes. But that definitely makes you think about these things you might not have thought about when you were a 30-year-old yoga teacher.
Yeah. Did you both grow up in Endicott?
I didn't. I'm actually from Connecticut, and I moved here for grad school and had a point where in my life I didn't know really where I was going to go and what I was going to do because I got my degree in French history. And then I was kind of lost, and I found that I could really delve into yoga because I loved teaching, and that's where I really found a lot of passion. And Jason grew up in the area.
Yeah, I grew up across what would be across the river, still same county, but a place called Vestal, and moved away for a little while to San Francisco, but came back for my family business and fell in love with yoga along the way and brought it back with me basically, and with the help of a friend, opened a studio back in 2009 that we called Binghamton Yoga. But it's because we were practicing in multiple places. I'm sure you've been through this too, where basically you're just renting space in different places, everything from like an art studio to a church basement. You're doing yoga here, there. And we decided to make a website and call it Binghamton Yoga because we were primarily in Binghamton, which is the bigger town around here. But things were going well. And it was clear that we could support having a space of our own. And we had certain parameters, like a large room with no pillars, good lighting, parking. Like those were things we really thought of.
Everybody take notes. Everybody listening. I've been talking about this stuff. Listen to what he just said. Parking.
Yes.
Parking.
Nobody thinks about parking, but parking, columns, those are good points.
Yes. And big, tall windows with lots of light. It was really a pretty place. Affordable rent is key. Yeah. Absolutely key.
Yeah.
So that brought us to Endicott. And we kept the name because it successfully searches in Google. You know, you want to pick a name that Google will know people in your area are going to find.
Yeah, and if Binghamton is close enough to the location, you want to include that bigger frame because that's going to hit in the searches as well. But I guess I'm curious about that. Like, I imagine it's not Google that's bringing people to you as much as just the people. Like, first of all, before we talk about that, you mentioned your family business. Is that the Our Country Hearts?
Yep, Our Country Hearts. Yep. So many years ago, my parents started a business that was a gift shop, but it slowly expanded into a furniture store, and now we have a restaurant as well. And that's my primary job. It's a great pastime. It's a small business, much like the studio. One-on-one, I work there. I don't just own it. And I like the hands-on nature. I like seeing my customers. I like interacting them, even when they have a problem. But most of the time, they're so happy. I mean, we've got over, like 600 reviews on Google, and we're 4.5 stars. And that's pretty good when you consider a 1 star every now and then from somebody who just absolutely hates you. Really draws it down. So we get tons of 5-star reviews and lots of happy people.
Yeah, and I know when we had the DVD on Amazon for a while, which we don't anymore, but like when we did, we had this like awesome 5-star rating for a long time. One person throws up a 1 star. They didn't even email us, to like, at least give a chance to make them happy, and then it totally trashes your rating, right?
Yep.
But you know what I want to say? It's so crazy. First of all, I think I heard you right, and I remember correct. It's a furniture store and a restaurant, right?
And a gift store, yep.
And a gift store, all in one. And it's very quaint. You can see the pictures online if people want to click through to the description. And my wife and I got this house in Pennsylvania when we moved here. And one of our main things was we don't want to buy shitty IKEA clipboard crap furniture anymore. We have all this stuff we brought with us, and we're like, we're not buying any more of this. We want real furniture. And it's not actually that easy to come by. We've been going online. We just got something off of a Craigslist. Somebody had something from some old farmhouse that we refurbished. So it seemed like, I don't know, you've been selling furniture. Your parents were selling furniture, and now you're selling furniture. With the advent of the internet, do people still come in and buy furniture? Can you?
A lot. Oh, yeah. We sell over $1 million a year in furniture, and it's all real wood furniture, oak, maple, cherry, hickory, that kind of stuff. There really is a parallel between the small businesses and the products that they sell between what we do at Our Country Hearts and what we do at the studio, because they're both real tangible goods. I don't like getting involved in this consumer society, which is basically they're selling you a loan that happens to have furniture attached to it, and the stuff breaks down before you've paid it off. That's your usual model for a big box store. It's the same model you see with the people doing unlimited memberships where they hope you don't show up. I mean, it's just not something we're interested in,
I like that you draw that parallel, because I think that it is the same kind of sensibility of doing business or something, the way a big box store builds into the model that it's going to fall apart and you're going to have to get a new one or whatever. Yeah. In the same way that it benefits centers who do unlimited memberships to have people not come more than come, although it doesn't benefit the teachers if they get paid per student. So there was always that odds. We talked about it on the show recently.
Yep.
Yeah.
So at the studio, do you not do any unlimited memberships? Do you just do class cards still?
We have class cards. We do unlimited memberships, but they are on card stock. We don't have anything where we're quite straightforward and simple. And it's kept us
recurring. You should say
no. There's no recurring memberships.
Oh, see, that is a difference. That's a good point because that's what I did at the center. Like I came up with a number for an unlimited monthly card.
Yeah,
but it wasn't automatically recurring.
No. Yeah. So we have like a 3-month unlimited. We have a 6-month unlimited, but it's not automatically recurring. We don't, everything that we do through like the booking and stuff like that, it's all very, I don't want to say not technological, but it's pretty kind of, everybody signs in on pen and paper.
It's old school. That is old school.
It's great because it means that we really get to connect with our students when they sign in. I know everyone's like how everyone writes their name. It helps me remember everybody's name because I see them write it. I then have to go into our little box of cards, find their card, pull it out, write their name, or write the date that they came. It creates a real personal level.
And that keeps the personal level, but behind the scenes, you then type it all into a database that I made.
Yes.
And the database is, I'm actually trained as a computer programmer, so I wrote an Access database that is now online in the cloud for us, so we can get to it from anywhere. But we type everybody into it, and so if somebody gets an unlimited who really doesn't come much, we can tell them, like, this might not make sense for you. And if somebody's been coming a lot, like, we can run these reports and decide. It's actually a very important part of deciding what our cost structure is while we keep it very personal, we also have the data behind the scenes, and we're not paying mind body to do it. It is not hard. Most of our students don't care to book online because we have 1,500 square feet of practice space. I mean, we could fit 40 people in our practice room. We don't.
If it was like Brooklyn and you had that much space, then you would put everybody this close and you could fit them, you know?
You know what's funny about that? I watched, there's a video, like a little virtual tour of your studio, and there was mat spaces marked out. And I did a quick tally. I was like, how many mats did they mark? And I was like, oh, they've left lots of room. You could put way more in there. I think I counted like 22 or something like that.
I was 23.
And I was like, no way, they could put more than that, but you were leaving lots of room. But you don't need to necessarily. You don't need to.
No.
And it's one thing that is nice about being able to mark out the spaces is now everybody kind of goes in and it's a bit neater, I guess. So everybody really does have a set amount of space around them and they can spread out and take their arms out and they don't have to like hold hands with their neighbor or, you know, be on top of one another.
You know, I would say I would thank COVID for that. I'm not going to say I don't thank COVID for many things, but they did give us two things I'd say that are really good, which is we marked out spaces and everybody complied. And now they all love it. And I think we became a little more breath-oriented, which I think is a great thing that came from it as well. I think it slowed down our breath, made us much more nasally oriented, which is really important.
Yeah. Well, so teaching with a mask made me realize how much I breathe with my mouth when I'm talking. And then what that does to how I feel as a teacher. Because the more I talk and breathe through my mouth and talk and breathe through my mouth, well, the hotter the mask would get and the grosser it felt. But also, the more kind of like frazzled I would feel, I guess, the more like up energy I feel. And I could see it happening with my students because I could see the mask moving and I knew they weren't breathing through their nose. And it became a thing where I was like, as you know, it became a breath-focused practice because of that. Like, breathe through your nose as much as you can. Like it is going to help you feel calmer, cooler, and not as frustrated, particularly with the mask. But now that the mask isn't there, it's still a really important part of the practice.
And how many times did you have to have the mask is about a surrender type conversation, right? Which actually I think is also pretty good because I mean, I didn't love the mask. Let's face it. Probably no one did, but you still had to do it. And people would come in and they wanted to just unload their frustration on you. And when we realized it was good for the nasal breath and all the other things that were coming with it, I was like, you know what? Think of it as a prop. Like we use blocks, we use blankets. You're using a mask, and it really will help you breathe better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can appreciate that you both are finding silver linings in having to teach classes with masks or having people wear masks, but
I convinced you, huh?
I mean,
it's so nice that we don't have to do it.
You know, the fact that the masks help people refine their breath. Okay, I'll take it. I get it, but I don't want us to go back to the mask again, and I don't want to have that conversation. Although that's interesting because another thing I know about you, Jason, that I am curious is that you hold a local office in your local government. And I will say that part of me, I moved to Easton, Pennsylvania. It's like 2 hours away from New York. And I moved to like a neighborhood, which is basically like a square mile next to a college called College Hill. And so like you described, there's like College Hill, then there's Easton proper, then there's Northampton, kind of like the way the kind of layers of zones of geographic go out or whatever.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get to know my neighborhood or whatever. And it took me a few years before I settled in. And then I went to the neighborhood association meeting because I saw a sign. And the first time I showed up, they happened to be doing elections for new board members on that day. And one of the open slots that nobody was running for was communications director.
Wow.
And I was like, well, I know how to do stuff with that, so I was elected communications director on that day.
Oh my goodness.
But but when I got there, they were wonderful people. The neighborhood association's been here for 30 years, but everything was still like paper brochures. Yeah. Everybody doing their memberships with a check. They had no website. I was like, what? So I like made them a website and like got them an email list together and ultimately started recurring, people being able to have their memberships be recurring. Online. And all that happened right before the pandemic hit. And it essentially saved. It basically saved the neighborhood association. Like some people dropped out. It was just like me and the president held it together, the two of us.
Congratulations.
So anyways, now I'm the vice president. I'm saying all this because I have like had a little glimpse into the local government. Like the mayor comes to the neighborhood associations and I know the mayor and stuff. So I know you ran for local office. Did people in your family hold local office before you? What was that for you? Why did you decide to do that?
It's definitely a big topic we could talk about at length. I decided because when I was in high school going into college, I thought I wanted to be involved in politics and I started doing some poli-sci. I later realized I wasn't interested in poli-sci, but I was very interested in how people make decisions. And I actually became a dual major with economics because I really liked the idea of how people make decisions in their lives. And economics is all about that. Like, where are your resources and where do they take you? And I got to work in a local office for a state senator. And that is sort of my intro to it. And I learned how you run for office. Kind of like you as a communications director, like you need to know how you do it. There is definitely a way you win an election and a way you lose an election. And I've been challenged a few times and I've won 4 times now. So, I really enjoy it. You have to surrender. Yeah, I'm on 9 years right now. You have to surrender to the process and you're not going to reshape everything at once, but you can make a difference. You really can. One person at a time can make some difference. And I really applaud you for getting involved because we need more people. We don't have people coming out for civic organizations and they're so important. We talk about change and then nobody shows up at the meeting. There's not going to be any change if nobody shows up. And just logging on your phone is not enough. We need you here.
And Jason, one thing that I've been the behind the scenes. I hear and see, and I drive them around to sign petitions and stuff like that. One thing that I do think links the worlds together between local politics and our yoga studio is that it's easy to have really strong philosophical beliefs, but that a lot of ways you have to meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. And I know, speaking as a studio owner and as a yoga teacher, if I have a really strong philosophical belief and my student can't fit that mold. Well, what does it mean for me as a teacher if I can't meet them? If I can't bring them in some way to a place where they can maybe meet me halfway, or I can meet them where they are and bring them in a way to where I hope they can appreciate my opinion or my belief. Maybe see it my way and go along, but maybe we'll just meet as equals where we are. And I think that has, seeing those two worlds that, I mean, I don't think many people, put together politics and yoga, but
I mean, that's why I also bring it up, because, a lot of times people, even myself, have, particularly with everything that happened over the years, it's easy as a yoga teacher to just feel like you're talking about whatever's going on. But at some point I was like, I don't think it's smart for me to talk about some things that I'm not super informed about or whatever, or because frankly, how polarizing, I've been talking about God. It's talk about stepping my feet in the two. What are you supposed to not talk about politics? Not supposed to bring up politics and God when you're at the holidays because everybody gets mad. So I guess it's an interesting thing because being in the world of politics, I mean, I don't know how it is in Endicott. I guess you're a county legislator, so I don't know what that experience is like. How polarized is the legislature in Endicott?
Well, the interesting thing is that I would say you're right that in general, we are all pretty polarized by a media that's so focused on the large-scale federal government with occasional glimpses of state and very minor glimpses of local. But the truth is local government affects you far more on a daily basis. If we didn't pick up your garbage, it would not be good. If we didn't run the septic, the airport, the landfill, the water, sanitary water, all these things, you'd have major problems within hours. And that's local government. And I think when we focus on the practical and do meet people where they are, things are better. It's easier. We actually vote, Democrats and Republicans, I hate even saying those words on here, but we vote unanimously 97% of the time in the legislature. And in the other 3%, 2% of it is Republicans versus Republicans or Democrats versus Democrats. It's only 1% of the time that we're split on party lines. That could almost be a flip of a coin at that point. It is really impressive. I think we've done a good job. And we're pretty split county. It would be a purple, on the map. I think we've done a good job of trying to keep national level politics out of our discussion as a county. Because sometimes people try to get us to do that. And I say, if I bring up this issue, and I'm not saying I disagree with you about whatever this thing is, but if I bring this up at the legislature, I am going to upset some of the people that I need to work with. And we sort of have a tacit agreement here that we're not going to bring up issues that we can't change. And that
maybe aren't really affecting your local life.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and as a politician in a local government, you don't have control over a really big issue. It is like the water that people get that you can have an effect on.
Probably the hardest thing is people say, well, no, you do have an effect. You can tell Albany, which is the New York State capital. Yeah, I could send them a letter. They will circular file it as soon as it arrives. It is, and so it is interesting in this world that's so focused on these large issues that when I got the position in what I considered a large organization, I had to step back and be small again, basically, and really focus on the personal level. There was a woman I visited. This is going back a few years. It was during, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Oh my goodness. And I have no opinion one way or another. I mean, I probably should, but I'm a local guy I'm focused on paving our roads. Okay. So I go to this door and I hear the hearings in the background. It was a beautiful afternoon. End of summer, I think. I don't really know exactly, but it's beautiful. And I heard it in the background and she came to the door and she just unloaded on me every ounce of just passionate, hating politicians, particularly my party, blah, blah, blah. And I stood there and I thanked, it was hard, but I stood my ground and I just absorbed what she said. And I said, I appreciate this. And I started quoting some things like JFK and ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country kind of stuff, which I now understand much better. And we started to work through that really virulent stuff. And she started to come apart. And by the end of the conversation, Her husband had died 2 weeks earlier. She was so mad about what had happened in the way he had died, and she just wanted to unload on anybody. She hugged me and cried by the time I left, because somebody actually spent the time to let her unwind. The same way, like peeling the onion off of a new student at yoga. Like, you sometimes just have to peel this hard outer shell off of them. We all have so much more in common than apart. And that was a really interesting and special moment.
I get it. I think that's such a perfect an example or metaphor for what kind of needs to happen. There now needs to be that humanity through line that gets more priority than whatever other stuff. And it does seem like sometimes the political parties, they just serve to become divisive. I mean, honestly, I was registered independent all through college. I changed my registration to vote for Bernie, and then I was so disenchanted, I'm back to being an independent again. But your story really goes to it. I think that there is, and it serves interests that are often not regular people's interests.
Right.
To have people mad about stuff and have that get in the way of just making good decisions about the roads and the water and stuff, We
have so much more in common than apart, whether it's in this field or some others. And there are good people, quote, on both sides of this aisle. Like, there are good people on both sides, and really you need to listen to one another.
Well, that's where the practice of yoga, like, compassion is a great thing to say, and the time to be compassionate is usually when you're uncomfortable, you feel really heightened in emotions or something like that. And like, that's where the practice starts. If that's the moment, you have to practice those things. And I think for me, the yoga practice, to come back to it every day and to practice it with yourself, makes it that easier to recognize that the person who just cut you off in traffic, or the person who's like kind of losing their mind and has a big episode of some sort, and they seem really just mean or a Karen or whatever, it's just maybe because they're having a really awful day, and that doesn't actually mean that they're a bad person.
Mm-mm. And I think for me, that story that you told, Jason, that is an example of yoga practice in my view. Like, you standing there and checking yourself and noticing how much you want to go back at this person or whatever it is, and weathering it. And then what happened? It's transformative and brought you together, which is beautiful,
Yep. I could go to her door any day now. I mean, it's just the way it is. Like, we became.
I bet you got her vote
friends.
too. I bet you got her vote.
Totally. And that's where it's at. Is you want to be with people where they're at, whether it's the studio or the politics or anything else. We need to get more into that part of life.
And what do you attribute the longevity of our country home and Binghamton Yoga? Is it just that you got good lease situations? You said that earlier. Maybe it's a combination of all those things, because so many places have not been able to sustain. And I guess there's like I've been saying on the podcast, a sweet spot. There's a certain population density of where you live that's probably needed, and relationships. So what do you think are kind of the elements or the formula that plays into the longevity that you guys had?
Okay, so keeping your costs in check is always, defense is always super important. Location is super important. The way the ambiance of the place is really great. You don't have to spend $1 million. I heard you talking with Ryan Hutchinson, I think, recently. Is that his name, Ryan?
I think Ryan Cunningham in Boston, maybe.
Yes. Yeah, and he was talking about how centers were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we really literally started our center with $10,000. And
I got mine started with a $15,000 SBA loan, which I paid off by the time I closed it. Yeah.
And my parents started Our Country Hearts with $5,000, and we're selling $1 million worth of furniture. I think that if you have a good idea, it's going to work kind of without a lot of money. It may not scale without more money, but you may need money to scale. But you should at least prove your point with lower funds, and don't risk a lot of capital on something that might not work. Make sure it works. If you need to scale it up, scale it up. I think that in both places we have a niche. We have a great customer who is a local person who wants real things, and our niche is better quality yoga and better quality furniture.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And I mean, out of curiosity, maybe this is for you, Emily, with everything that happened in the pandemic, did you do online classes? Did you keep them going? Did you stop doing them? How did that go for you? I mean, you said you got back in there with masks, whatever, but did you do online stuff? Did you keep it or did you let go of it?
It's a great question. So, March 15th, everything closed down, and we had a lot of people who had reached out to basically be like, are you going to do Facebook yoga? Or how are you going to do this? And I was just, it was a really challenging moment because first off, I had absolutely no idea that we were going to be closed for 4 months. And then second of all, I'm a small business owner who dabbles in social media promotion and advertising and does the website, but I had no idea how to even create a platform to do online classes. I know Zoom was like the way everybody did it, but how do you like monetize it? And it was just like this getting chucked into the deep end of trying to figure it out. And I basically was just like, for right now, we're not doing any online classes. And when we ended up coming back, I had really done a lot of different like research, and I tried to figure out how to make that work and what's the way to do this that isn't mind body, like $150 a month, or some way of doing it that was affordable, that was sustainable. I think I had found out how to do some sort of hybrid type thing using our website and Zoom and like Vimeo, like all sorts of different combinations of things.
Yeah, you should email me. We got it. You just got to put a couple of the free apps together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I did for several months, I did hybrid, and no one signed up to do it online on Zoom. Our customer really didn't want to do it online. They wanted to do it in person. But even doing for those few months, doing a hybrid class, nothing made me feel nice. The microphone would just stop working. And hard for my mind to be able to manage it. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, it's cutting out a little bit, but I think I got you that it was hard for you to manage doing it. And if people weren't really coming online, it didn't make sense. If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.